Funding for this video is brought to you in part by Book of the Month and from viewers like you. Thank you. Hi people, welcome to the video. I should say happy December. I cannot believe we are in the final stretch of 2022. We really don't have that much time left in the year. And so in the spirit of crunch time, we're gonna do a rapid fire reading review of the 20 books that I read in November. I hosted our second year of the Women Readathon, which was so nice. I got a couple of bingos on the board, did a few vlogs. I had a bunch of wonderful guests on the Instagram. It was such a good month. So today we'll just be talking about all the books that were read. There was a couple of poetry collections, a few graphic novels, some really thick books, and we'll talk about them all. But first, let's hear it from today's sponsor, who is none other than Book of the Month. Now, if you didn't already know, Book of the Month was Baby's first sponsor a little over a year ago, and we are still happily working together. It's a perfect subscription service for readers like me and like you, I assume, if you are watching this video. They are an ever-growing and popular bookish subscription service that sends new hardcover fiction right to your door. Their team consistently combs through hundreds of titles to give us a monthly selection of new and early release books. At the best price, mind you. I'm gonna say it once, I'm gonna say it a handful of times. Do not use my code for this month, because if you use code WONDER, you can get your first book from Book of the Month for $5. That's the price of a cup of coffee for a hardcover book. In this economy, music to my ears. However, my personal favorite part that I'm going to sing until the cows come home is their skip policy. You can pause, skip, or cancel at any time for any reason without being charged or penalized. Much like every other month, it is hard to choose from the selections, but I will now share with you the two that I chose. Starting with All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham, which is a suspenseful mystery thriller about a mother who cannot rest until she finds her kidnapped toddler son. And that's not a euphemism. She literally does not sleep. I'm sensing unreliable narrator. I'm sensing page turner. I'm sensing I don't even have to think twice before picking this book up. And the second book I picked is Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochran. This is a queer holiday rom-com. I mean, come on. I chose the Christmas romance last year as well, just to get that Hallmark movie feel, and it did it. It hit the mark, except this one features lesbian love. And it just sounds so cute and cozy, and I cannot wait to read it this month. So if you have a US or Canadian shipping address, you can get your first book from Book of the Month for $5 using the code WONDER. Do not use Allison Pages. Use Wonder. $5. $5! Let's go through some quick disclaimers and then discuss the 20 books that I read this month. You know the drill. 1. Don't compare yourself to anyone but yourself, especially when it comes to reading. If you're reading, you're winning. 2. Liking and disliking books is not a personal attack. We all look for different qualities and things when we read stuff. That's the beauty of it. And 3. Always check content or trigger warnings. If you have any sensitivities, there's no shame in that. Take care of yourself. And in this video, there's a 4th disclaimer, and that is that I am getting over a migraine, and so my brain is a slushy. If my words are slurred, if I'm pronouncing things wrong, that's why. That's why. Okay, this is so heavy. These are the 20 books that I read in November. In order, starting with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This is one of my favorite things that I read this month, so we started off so strong. It's a slow-paced, but still somehow chronically readable tale about these two characters named Sam and Sadie, who became childhood best friends under unideal circumstances, and their lives remain entwined throughout adulthood. And so we get this intimate portrayal about the intricacies of friendship that all takes place in the video game developing world. I know absolutely nothing about code or computer science, so do not let that sway you from picking this book up. You can enjoy it no matter what, I think. I really loved this one. I think it deserves all the hype that it has, to be perfectly honest. My only complaint is that I think the ending fizzled out a little bit too much. I wish that we ended as strongly as we began, but I still really liked it through and through. If you're looking for a similar reading experience as reading a John Green novel as a teenager but in a more adult space, this is your book. It also just has impeccable chronic pain and disability representation. I felt so seen by Sam throughout these pages. I just felt at home with this one. I felt nourished by the friendship. I was craving being creative after reading it. I just think this is as good as everyone says. Choo choo, I'm on the bandwagon. Next, In the Event This Doesn't Fall Apart by Shannon Lee Berry. Speaking of chronic pain and chronic illness, I follow Shannon on Instagram strictly for how eloquently poised her Instagram captions are. I've never felt so much just by reading something on Instagram. She suffers from migraines just like myself, but also her own bout of chronic illnesses, and just her way with words is so nice. And one day I commented something like, I can't wait for you to write a book, but then someone replied saying she does have a book, and this is that book. So this is a small collection of poetic essays, so to say, and she wrote them for her boyfriend in their first year of dating and then gifted it to him on their 1-year anniversary. Personally, I prefer reading things in her voice that have to do with disability and advocacy of such things, but it was so romantic and so cheesy. Much like a chocolate cake, it was way too rich to read in one sitting. I had to pick up poems here and there, but I liked it enough. I hope someday she writes something about her chronic illnesses, but for now, this was okay. Next, Feminism, Notes from the Women That a Movement Forgot by Mickey Kendall. We've touch briefly on this in vlogs, but when I was a teenager and I signed up to go to some private college to study cinematography, there were some feminist classes and I took them, and too long didn't read. They were extremely white feminist classes. And being more of a sick person and less wealthy from my peers, I definitely didn't feel like I belonged. Entire hour-long discussions would span from something as trivial as manspreading to something as problematic as only one gender can experience sexual assault. Yikes! So I thought, okay, if this is what feminism is, count me out. I'm in debt, I'm in pain. It'll be a cold day in hell when I believe that the biggest issue on planet Earth is becoming the next CEO. To me, there were just much bigger fish to fry. But spoiler alert, surprise, surprise, that's not what the movement is about. That's just one brand of feminism, and it's the brand of feminism that most people don't subscribe to. And so I wish I could time travel and give this book to 18, 19-year-old Allie, who felt discouraged by the curriculum that was offered to her. This book covers many issues that the movement often misses from the people who are the most disenfranchised by ignoring them. It's definitely a more readable nonfiction. They're more so essays with a very personal voice. It's a very fluid collection that clearly states each issue at the head of each chapter. From food disparities to wealth inequality, education, housing, this book covers it all. Most importantly, this provides a very necessary perspective for feminism for me as a white person. I may have felt a sense of not belonging to a movement because of my disabilities or lack of fiscal standing, but I'll never know what it's like to be disenfranchised for my race. So if you're looking to unlearn some common narratives from the loud and overpowering voice that is white feminism, and I hope you are, read this book. Next, Bug Boys by Laura Netzger. This is a graphic novel that I picked up for obvious reasons. I mean, hello! It's a colorful story about two beetle bug friends, and they're going on adventures and living their cute little buggy lives. This book feels as if Frog and Toad had a baby with Adventure Time. It has the gorgeous mundanity of a Frog and Toad story with the silly, adventurous whimsy of Adventure Time, but with the best friendship that's featured in both. It's technically middle grade, so don't expect the weight or themes of an adult graphic novel, but if you're looking to have a cute, fun time, if you're looking for some easy reading, wholesome vibes, if you want to be happy, go ahead and give this one a scoop. I like this one so much, I already ordered the other two, and I'm not sorry. The next two reads we're going to talk about in one swoop, and they are Giant Days Volume 1 and 2 by John Allison. This series follows Susan, Esther, and Daisy, who are three very different friends, but they all join forces at the start of their university careers, and they get into some hijinks. They shenaniganize. There's not too much more I can say about it. It really is just that, but trust me when I say that it is so much more. These two volumes gave me Saturday morning cartoon energy. It made me feel nostalgic for a place I've never been, and I've never laughed so much while reading anything before. I genuinely giggled out loud on several occasions and stopped to show Lawrence what was so funny. It's very episodic, and there are a few episodes, so to say, in each one. For example, in one, they all get sick, and each character embarks on their own silly little method to get unsick. Simple concepts like that are executed in somehow just such a hilarious way. I am loyal to this series through and through. Right under those Bug Boys is 3 more volumes of this. I couldn't help myself. I'm not sorry again. Next, Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend by Matthew Green. This is a story that follows a 3rd grade boy who's on the spectrum. His name is Max, but he has an imaginary friend named Budo, and the whole story is from Budo's perspective. I've had this one on my online TBR for years. It was one of the first things that I added to my Goodreads account. It literally ticks all the boxes of what I look for in a story. I love when a book is from a child's perspective. I love when characters are on the spectrum, or at least we're focusing on mental health themes. And 3, whimsy. What a creative concept. We're from an imaginary friend's perspective. But unfortunately, this is easily one of my biggest disappointments of this month, but also this entire year, maybe even of all time. It was very repetitive and slow paced, and I got a comment that said it was because it's young adult. There's a young adult in this stack that I gave 5 stars, even though I don't rate books with stars anymore. I can boogie with a young adult if it's written well. I'm sorry. This just wasn't written well, and it's not because of the genre it falls in. There was so much depth that we could have adventured into with this one, but it lacked it entirely. It felt like nobody edited this down, and honestly, that theory is strengthened by the fact that I found the worst typo I've ever seen in a book before. This looks like a cat stepped on the keyboard, and nobody looked at it before putting it on the shelves. And that's what the entire book felt like to me. And you know, I thought about it. I thought, Allie, you're being quite harsh. But then, upon further thinking about it, this book doesn't have a theme. What book doesn't have a theme? There's no takeaway message whatsoever. And all of these aspects are so much more disappointing because the concept of this holds so much promise and potential, and unfortunately, none of that was met. I really thought that this would be a new favorite. Truly, I was making space in my favorite shelf, but I did not like this one at all. Next, Alone in Space, a collection by Tillie Walden. She read another Tillie Walden. Is anybody surprised? Oddly enough, this one left me with a very similar feeling as Tomorrow Times 3 did, in that I closed it feeling so creatively supercharged, because what this collection includes are a lot of Tillie Walden's shorter works, but also even some one-pagers that she submitted to contests or online spaces, and even some comics from when she was a teenager, starting her comic journey. So throughout this, you can see not only how much she's grown as an artist, but you can also take note of the visual motifs that have stuck with her for decades. I absolutely loved this. I loved her use of big people, small cities. I love that cats and space are often revisited in most of her things. I love the centering of female love and female friendship. And most of all, I'm just obsessed with Tillie Walden's artistic style. The use of color, the composition, all of it. She just inspires me to no end. And that's just such a special and rare thing. So I cherish this. I loved my time here. Next, The Black Unicorn, Poems by Audre Lorde. So this is a classic poetry collection, and it centers the Black experience, more so what it's like being a Black woman and also being a lesbian. I said in the vlog in which I read this that I'm really trying to become a poetry girly. I really want to be a reader that can find something in every genre that I can enjoy, because I believe that it's possible. And in that video I got a lot of comments letting me know which poetry collections I should try next, which I really appreciate. I love when you guys give me book recommendations. So being a pretty inexperienced poetry reader, of course, there were a lot of things that went over my head, unfortunately. But excitingly enough, I could feel some things clicking. There were a lot of moments that took my breath away or hit me right in the heart, and sometimes I didn't even know why, which I think is part of the magic of poetry. I just love Lorde's way with words, and even though I'm pretty inexperienced, I could still enjoy my time here, which I think is a great sign. I loved slowing down and circling little blurbs that I connected with and enjoyed. I feel like it's also just such a unique way to read about someone's perspective, read about someone's lived experiences. Waking up in the morning, pouring a cup of coffee and reading poetry, or bringing it in the bathtub, I feel like a whole completely different person. I feel leveled up. So thank you, Lorde, for writing this. Thank you for writing something that actively encouraged my interest in poetry. Next, As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zulfa Katoe. This is easily one of my favorite books that I read this month. Definitely top tier of the year. It's a historical fiction that follows a young woman named Salma, who was a pharmacy student but quickly was forced into becoming a surgeon as the revolution in Syria unfolded around her. She lives with her pregnant sister-in-law named Layla, and the two of them are grappling with the conflict of whether they should stay in their home country and continue fighting or risk the dangers of fleeing and starting over. I'm gonna keep saying it, this is the most harrowing, the most heartbreaking, but also the most hopeful story that I've ever read. It beautifully shows the meaning of home, whether that's the soil beneath your feet or the soul surrounding you. It's also so gorgeously told despite the suffering, which really reinforces the central theme of the power and importance of finding happiness amongst the figurative and literal rubble surrounding you. The characters are so concise and well done, which reminds the reader that being human and feeling the wide range of experiences is a blessing in and of itself, that the grimy, less glamorous emotions like fear or guilt are useful tools in survival. This is educational, but still a rather difficult read, so if you feel as though you can, I urge you to read this. It's dynamic, it's potent. I couldn't possibly be more impressed with it. I read this in one setting without even trying. If there's one book that you read from this stack, read this one. Next, The Sprite and the Gardener by Rhea Abrigo and Joe Witt. This is a short yet grand graphic novel that follows a small sprite named Wisteria, who's eager to return to the tradition of sprites being the caretakers of human gardens. As she explores the way things used to be, she stumbles upon a gardener who is anything but skilled at keeping their garden alive. And so while they're sleeping, Wisteria works her magic to sprout the garden to its full potential. So simple and so sweet. Serious Studio Ghibli energy. If you're looking to have your soul warmed and you're interested in some absolutely breathtaking illustrations, then this is the book for you. Kay O'Neill, the creator of one of my favorite graphic novel series of all time, says, "A beautiful flower-scented tale that shows us the most beautiful gardens are the ones we grow together." Need I say more? Next, I Want to Die But I Want to Eat Taboki by Bexahi. This is a nonfiction in which our author transcribes her appointments with her psychiatrist across a 12-week period. I definitely resonated with the experience of misinterpreting social situations and then falling into disastrous black and white thinking. But overall, I left this book feeling rather unsatisfied. It's a very interesting idea to transcribe these appointments. It makes it seem like it will be a very raw experience. And while sure, I did underline a few things that the psychiatrist said, there were a few lines that really got me, but overall I just felt like this book didn't provide an overarching message of any kind. Once all the psychiatry appointments come to a close, we're left with a few disjointed essays, which felt kind of out of left field from the rest of the reading experience. I guess I was just a bit confused by the execution and was quite shocked at how little I felt like I connected to our author despite how exposing such a method is. I was just hoping to dig deeper and leave with a bigger emotional impact, but instead it left me wondering how authentic an appointment could be if both parties knew they were being recorded. It was still okay. It's not a terrible book by any means. I just really thought that this would stab me in the heart, and I didn't feel much of anything at all. Next, Can't Spell Treason Without T by Rebecca Thorne. So let's get this straight, because I was very upset in the reading vlog in which I read this book. The main reason for that is that it's advertised as cozy fantasy. Cozy fantasy means nothing happens. That's the beauty of cozy fantasy. There are no stakes, you just marinate in mundanity and leave. And that is not what this book did. I don't know why this book is in cozy fantasy. It doesn't do that. I was feeling pretty bad about comparing this one to Legends and Lattes so much, which is a very popular book at the moment. However, I read online that this author was extremely inspired by Legends and Lattes. Point being, I find it fair to compare the two. I'm the too long didn't read version of this review is that if you read Legends and Lattes and you're looking to get more of that, this is not your book. The stakes were way too high in my opinion. There were too many dragon egg adventures, there was too much being hunted by the royal guard, and not enough imagery of this cozy space that I knew existed but couldn't imagine in my head. That being said though, if you are looking for a fantasy that has some sapphic elements and some slower moments, this is the perfect book for you. But that's just not what I was looking for, and had I known that this wasn't actually a cozy fantasy, I wouldn't have picked it up. But since I did, it was fine enough. I'm sure this book is perfect for so many people. It just wasn't what I was looking for. Next, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. I finally read this book. I feel like I've been meaning to read it for so long. This is a children's book that has a more inky but still similar art style to Winnie the Pooh, and it also has a very similar energy to Winnie the Pooh. There's no story here. There's no first A, then B, we end with C moments. Each page is sort of just a little simple sentence alongside a little drawing that, yes, are very simple, but still somehow quite profound. If you enjoyed Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien by Johnny Sun, I think you'd enjoy this one, and vice versa. It definitely had live, laugh, love energy, but that doesn't change how true the statements are. It was sweet, it was simple, I liked it. Next, This Was Our Pact by Ryan Andrews. This is a story about two unlikely friends who end up alone on this adventure following the lanterns that their village sets off during their autumn equinox. The two of them are determined to see where they end up, and so they end up spending the evening biking along and meeting a slew of silly little characters, one of them being a talking bear. The art is exactly what I look for in my graphic novels. It's beautiful, it's sketchy, it's transportive. I also chuckled a couple of times with this. I thought the dialogue was so blunt and honest sometimes. Reading this unearthed a little spirit of whimsy in my soul. It nourished my inner child. It was such an imaginative story that's long enough to provide a complete experience, but definitely is not drawn out in my opinion. You definitely get your bang for your buck with this one. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. One of my favorites this month. Definitely a favorite graphic novel of all time. Up next are the two books that we read for our Pocket Pages book club, which is the book club for this channel. We read something new within the first 3 weeks of every month and discuss in a temporary Discord server within the last week of every month. So there's no way for anybody to miss out. Time zones can't stop us. Join us if you'd like. It's $1 a month. You can come and go whenever you want. This is the first month where we read 2 things technically. This was the main event, but then if you'd like for extra credit, there was this one. We'll get to both. The first one was As Long as Grass Grows, The Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock by Dina Gilio Whittaker. This book is exactly what it says it is. It historically breaks down all that Native Americans have done for the environment, for the planet, and shows how colonizers have impeded or completely destroyed all their efforts. It is so jam-packed with information, and admittedly, it wasn't the most accessible nonfiction, so I appreciate the fact that we could read this one together. I feel as though it's important to be honest with that, but I really hope that that doesn't scare you away from reading this one, because I think that this should be required reading, especially in the United States. There is so much crucial information within this one. We all learned so much. The most shocking thing to me that I had never heard about before was actually how harmful national parks are and how man-made they are. That was such a fascinating segment. I wish I was assigned to this when I was in school, is all I can say really. I encourage you to pick this one up. Despite the fact that it might be a challenge, read what you can, take your time. There's no test at the end of it. Just learn what you can. That's all you can do. Don't psych yourself out. It's a good one. And then alongside that we read I Lost My Talk by Rita Jo. It's a children's book comprised of a short poem by Rita Jo, but a new breath of life was breathed into it thanks to the art of Pauline Young. So along each line of the poem, we are met with a gorgeous watercolor oil painting. I'm not sure which paint she used, but we get some beautiful art is the point. So it's a super fast read, but what I found especially crucial is the short history of residential schools in the back, which is what Rita Jo's poem is about. Her personal experience in being forced to go to a residential school, having her language and culture stripped from her. It's just such a perfect meeting of personal experience, art, and history. So thank you for such another wonderful reading month, Pocket Pages. Appreciate you so much. Next, The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. Y'all, from the get-go, this was another disappointment for the month. I'm so sorry. I was not anticipating it on being that way. I've heard nothing but rave reviews about Ruth Ozeki, and from friends and folks that I'm really compatible with book-wise, so it took me by surprise that this is how we ended up. But alas, let's back up. This story follows a teenage boy who begins to hear voices after the death of his father. Again, ticks all my boxes. Children's perspective, mental health theme. But this book just dragged for me. It really did. And I don't get why, because I can definitely enjoy a chunky book that goes off on silly little tangents. But there was just something about the silly little tangents that I didn't connect with. Every time I felt myself begin to take root in the story, I'd be ripped out of it and thrown in a completely different direction. So I could never really connect. We bounced between Benny's perspective and his mom's perspective. It felt like the majority of the book we were from his mom's perspective, which was my personally least favorite place to be in the book. But then sometimes we're in the book's perspective, and then occasionally we read a few chapters from a Marie Kondo-esque self-help declutter your life book. It just felt like there was way too much here. Like this book bit off way more than it could chew. I'm extra disappointed because there were some serious, beautifully written lines. Like the writing was objectively good and impressive. It really was. I'm looking for the quote that's about sensitivity and how everyone's sensitivities are important. I've never connected to a line in a book more, I think. Where is it? Here we are. Page 257. People are born from the womb of the world with different sensitivities, and the world needs every single one of you to experience it fully so that it might be fully experienced. If even one person were left out, the world would be diminished. Yes, 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 yes. Everything, all about that, yes. But it just felt like way too much work for what you are rewarded with in the end. I just think if this book were edited down to about half and we stayed in Benny's perspective, this could have been a new favorite, but unfortunately, it's just not what it was. Don't worry, I'm still determined to read her other book, A Tale for the Time Being. I hear that they're two very different experiences. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. So I'm sorry if this was your favorite book and I didn't like it, but I just didn't, and I'm not gonna lie about that. Next, 7 Empty Houses by Samantha Schweblin. The blurb of this one says, the 7 houses in these 7 stories are strange. A person is missing, or a truth, or a memory. Some rooms are enticing, some unmoored, others empty. This is an anthological collection or a short story collection all around the theme of houses and homes. I read Schweblin's 2 full novels, Fever Dream and Little Eyes, earlier this year, and I was just so impressed with both. Schweblin might be one of my favorite authors of all time. I believe this one originally came out in Spanish in 2015, but it only was very recently translated to English, so I pre-ordered it. So excited. I think there are 2 reasons why I struggled with this one. The first one being short stories really aren't my thing. I don't like how disjointed they are. Once I'm connected to characters and a situation, I don't like for it to end so fast and then immediately have to get used to new characters and things like that. Another genre that I'm working on. But I think the biggest issue was that I read this one immediately after reading Ruth Ozecki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. And you know what? I just didn't have my thinking cap on anymore. I took that bitch off and I was stomping it into the ground, into the dirt. I was sick of thinking. And that's a me problem. That is not a Schweblin problem. So I definitely tried my best, but she didn't get a fair shot. Like, let's just be honest. I could tell that the writing is good. I love Samantha Schweblin's writing. It's just something I'll need to revisit is all. So I'll do that. Next, or should I say last? And I'm sorry that this is the last book. It wasn't a scheme. It's just literally the last book I read in November, and I usually do my little reviews in order of reading them. But the book that made my eyes create liquid was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is the book that I've been wanting to get around to for a hot minute, but I've been putting it off because so many people have been saying it's mid, and they are wrong. This book is not mid. This book is outstanding. Okay, so if you haven't heard of this one, it's about a little cafe in Japan, and within it you go back in time, but the catch is you have to return before your coffee gets cold. So you can only go back in time for a little bit, just a little bit, as a treat. There are other small rules. For example, there's only 1 chair in which you can do this, and because of that, you cannot go back in time to any moment in any place. It has to be a memory that took place in this cafe, but you get the gist. What a concept. What a concept. This is so clever. How did he think of this? This is amazing. It had an anthological or like an episodic feel to it. Each chapter is about somebody else who comes to the cafe and wants to travel in time for different reasons. But all of the stories and characters are woven together so effortlessly and so beautifully. You get intimate with the people who run the cafe. You get to know the regulars of the cafe. I'm gonna quote my friend Alex in saying that this book is about the many kinds of love, because it is. This book celebrates the many ways that humans connect and love one another. It is so beautiful. It's so deeply moving. It didn't have me sobbing, ugly crying, like Crying in H Mart did, which is the only other book that has ever made tears fall from my face. There have been a few that make my face warm and maybe make my eyes a little wet, but no tears have fallen. And I was so entranced in the book that I didn't even realize I was crying until they fell off my face onto my pillow. 2 tears. 2, count them, 2 tears. I kind of get how the writing style isn't for everybody. Kawaguchi is originally a playwright that changes the way a story is told, fine. But with a concept like this, and characters like this, and moments that this book captures, I don't get anybody that calls it mid. I just don't. This moved me. It was beautiful. It hurt me. It made me want more. And luckily there are 2 other books that take place in this space, and I bought them both. And once again, I'm not sorry. And that's it. Those are the 20 books I read last month. We did it. We did it. I didn't think I'd be able to film this today. I started off this video feeling a lot worse than I do now, and I don't know if it's because the 2 leaves that I deep-throated finally started working their magic, or if it's because talking about books will cure any ailment that I ever feel ever. Whatever it is, thanks for watching, and thank you Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video. Remember, you can get your first hardcover book from Book of the Month fresh off the press, baby, for $5 using the code WONDER. I'm still blown away. That's insane. And of course, an extra special thank you to everyone on my Patreon who make it possible for this sick little wench to be able to read books and talk about books on the internet unlearn.com. It's because of y'all that I make videos as often as I do. I am so grateful for y'all. Thank you to everyone that's on it. And as always, thank you for clicking, thank you for caring, and thank you for being nice. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.